a sprawling estate in the Hamptons, a Latina housekeeper's son is invited by a smug billionaire to play chess. It was meant to be a cruel prank to mock him. Under the disdainful stares of the elite, he silently turned the game around. No one suspected he was a chess prodigy. That match didn't just shatter the billionaire's ego. It opened a door that would transform his life forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. A billionaire invites her Latina housekeeper's son to play chess as a prank. She had no idea he was a child genius. "Come here, kid. Why don't you show me how they play chess in the barrio?" Mrs. Eleanor Prescott's voice rang through the grand parlor of her Hamptons estate, dripping with the arrogance of someone who's never had to work for anything. Mateo Alvarez, 17, was assisting his mother, Sofia, serving guests at a high-profile gala when the billionaire decided to make him the night's amusement. The other guests, Wall Street tycoons, senators, and their polished spouses, chuckled softly behind their crystal flutes of Dom Perignon. Eleanor had organized the gala to raise funds for disadvantaged youth, but clearly she hadn't expected one of them to be pouring sparkling water in her own home. The irony delighted her. "I bet he can at least push the pieces around," Eleanor went on, pointing to the handcrafted rosewood chessboard adorning the mahogany table. "It'll be amusing to see what this kid can do against someone who's actually studied the game." Mr. Langston, a tech mogul with a string of Silicon Valley startups, whispered to his wife, "I bet he doesn't even know the knight moves in an L shape." Laughter rippled through the room like waves across a sea of entitlement. Sofia, Mateo's mother, averted her gaze and tightened her grip on the silver tray. 20 years cleaning that estate, raising her son alone on a housekeeper's wages, and she still had to endure her boss using her boy as a prop to entertain her wealthy friends. She'd known Eleanor since her debutante days, watching her evolve from a privileged heiress into a ruthless socialite. "Sofia, you can pause serving for a bit," Eleanor said with mock warmth. "I want you to watch your son play. It'll be a learning experience for both of you." Mateo, however, stood still for a moment, his dark eyes scanning not just the board, but every face in the room. At 17, he'd learned that silence often reveals more about people than words ever could. In that moment, he saw a crowd of privileged adults oblivious to who they were dealing with. Something in Mateo's stance made a few guests stop laughing, a quiet intensity, like the hush before a storm. His fingers twitched slightly, as if tracing moves on an invisible board. "Of course, Mrs. Prescott," Mateo replied, with a composure that prompted curious glances among the guests. "It'll be my pleasure." Eleanor smirked, settling into a velvet-upholstered chair like a monarch awaiting a spectacle. "Wonderful. I bet you've never played on a board like this, have you? Hand-carved rosewood, each piece worth more than—" Well, you get it. State Senator Margaret Collins, seated by the floor-to-ceiling windows, spoke up. "Eleanor, are you sure this isn't a bit harsh? The poor kid's going to be embarrassed." "Nonsense," Eleanor shot back, adjusting her sapphire necklace. "It's a chance to learn. He'll tell his friends he played chess in a real estate." What Eleanor Prescott didn't know, and would soon learn the hard way, was that this barrio kid had spent the last 8 years mastering every chess opening, strategy, and trap devised by grandmasters. While his peers played Fortnite, Mateo pored over chess books borrowed from the local library and studied iconic matches on a refurbished laptop he'd fixed himself. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, while Sofia worked late shifts cleaning offices, Mateo analyzed games by Kasparov, Fischer, and Carlsen. He'd memorized over 200 openings and could recite the 50 most famous defenses in chess history by heart. Most critically, Eleanor had no clue she was about to be outplayed by the very boy she'd underestimated, due to sheer bias, in front of her influential guests. When the truth emerged, it wouldn't just be a chess loss. It would be a lesson she'd carry forever. As Eleanor arranged the pieces with dramatic flair, Matteo observed each guest. Something in his gaze hinted he wasn't just preparing for a game. He was gearing up to challenge every assumption in that room about who truly deserved respect. If this tale of prejudice and triumph resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next proves that judging someone by their background can be the costliest mistake of all. Eleanor took her seat on the white side with the confidence of someone who'd never lost anything significant. "I always play white, dear. It's a family tradition," she said, ignoring the chess convention of determining colors by lot. Matteo nodded quietly, arranging his black pieces with precision that made Mr. Langston raise an eyebrow. Each piece was placed dead center in its square, perfectly aligned, as if that rosewood board was just one of many he'd conquered. "Let's make this fun," Eleanor announced to the guests. "If the kid manages to give me even a slight challenge, I'll donate $1,000 to some inner-city school." Laughter echoed again, but Matteo looked up and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sophia felt a shiver. She knew that smile. It was the same one Matteo wore as a child when classmates underestimated him in math competitions, the same one he had at 12 when he declared he no longer needed help with calculus. Eleanor opened with a cautious pawn move. 4. "King's Gambit, dear. A classic we learned at Yale," she said patronizingly, as if teaching a toddler to tie their shoes. Matteo responded instantly. "C5. The Sicilian defense." A hush fell over the room. That wasn't the move of someone who merely knew the pieces. It was the move of someone who understood theory. "Intriguing," murmured Senator Collins, leaning forward. Eleanor paused for 3 seconds, long enough for Matteo to see she'd memorized a few openings, but lacked grasp of their underlying principles. She played NF3, following a pattern likely picked up at a country club. As Eleanor pondered her next move, Matteo's mind drifted back 8 years. At 9, he'd found a tattered chess book in a library discard bin. He'd smuggled it home in his backpack and asked Sophia to teach him the rules. "Mijo, why do you want to learn that?" his mother had asked, weary from a double shift. "To be like the rich kids, Mama. They always say they're smarter than us." Back then, Sophia earned just $600 a month. There was no money for lessons or tech, but the public library became Matteo's sanctuary. Every day after school, he biked 3 miles to study historical games and forgotten books. Eleanor played D3, a timid move reflecting her cautious nature in chess and life, favoring safe positions where wealth could ensure victory. Matteo responded with NC6, developing with intent. Each move took less than 5 seconds, as if following a script etched in his mind years ago. "Our little friend is moving too fast," Eleanor remarked to the guests. "In real chess, you think before you play." That's when Matteo made his first psychological ploy. He paused, feigned deep thought for 15 seconds, and played G6, setting up a bishop's fianchetto. It seemed like a beginner's move, but it was part of a sophisticated plan that would unfold over 10 moves. "See," Eleanor crowed to the guests, "he lacks the patience to think." Typical. But Mr. Langston, who'd played chess at Stanford decades ago, recognized the setup. "Eleanor, he's building a hyper-accelerated dragon." "A what?" she snapped, irked at the interruption. "It's a complex Sicilian variation." Eleanor's shoulders tensed as she glanced at the board. Ridiculous. He probably saw it on YouTube. But as the game progressed, an unsettling pattern emerged. Matteo wasn't just reacting. He was controlling the game's rhythm. Every piece he moved found its ideal square, turning the board into a visual symphony. Sophia watched from the corner, her heart pounding. She knew Matteo was skilled, but she'd never seen him face someone so self-important. For the first time in 20 years at that estate, she saw unease in Eleanor Prescott's eyes, the fear of realizing she might not be as superior as she thought. Each taunt Eleanor lobbed only fueled Matteo's quiet resolve, strengthened by the very injustice she sought to impose. The privileged guests didn't realize their scorn was sealing Eleanor's fate on those 64 squares, soon to become the stage for one of the Hamptons' most memorable humiliations. Matteo's 10th move made Mr. Langston choke on his bourbon. He'd sacrificed a pawn in a seemingly casual move, but any seasoned player would spot the lethal trap. "Eleanor," Langston whispered urgently, "this kid's no novice." But Eleanor, set on proving her dominance, ignored him. "Relax, dear. He probably Googled a few moves. I'll wrap this up in 5 minutes." Then Matteo did something unexpected. He stood calmly and walked to Sophia, who stood in the corner, hands clasped. "Mama," he said softly, his voice carrying through the tense silence. "Remember when you said one day I'd show these people who we really are?" Sophia nodded, tears welling. She recalled the day Matteo turned 15, when she couldn't afford a cake. He'd found her crying in their tiny apartment's kitchen and vowed to change their lives. "That kid has more grace than all of us combined," Senator Collins murmured to her husband, watching the mother-son exchange. Eleanor tapped her fingers impatiently. "Can we get on with the game? I have other plans tonight." Matteo returned to the board, his demeanor shifted. No longer the timid teen invited for amusement, he was a young man bearing years of sacrifice, covert study, and resolve forged in hardship. His 11th move, executed with surgical precision, made Eleanor scowl. He'd created a double threat: protect the king, lose the queen; protect the queen, face checkmate in 3. That's impossible," Eleanor muttered, studying the board intently for the first time. Langston saw the truth. "Eleanor, you're being outmaneuvered by a kid who's likely never joined a chess club." As Eleanor scrambled for a way out, Matteo scanned the room. Senator Collins had set aside her champagne, captivated. The tech mogul pocketed his phone. Even Langston's wife, previously flipping through Vogue, now watched intently. Sophia knew that look on her son's face, the same one he had at 12, discovering the library's chess section, studying games for hours on a sluggish laptop, waking at 5 a.m. to solve tactical puzzles before school. Eleanor made a desperate move to escape the trap, but it was futile. Matteo had anticipated it 6 moves earlier. "Check," he said simply, moving his queen to a position with 3 winning paths. The silence was deafening. Eleanor stared at the board, then at Matteo, then back at the board. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from suppressed fury at being outplayed by someone she deemed lesser. "You must have seen that sequence somewhere," she said, her voice shrill. "No one learns that alone." Matteo smiled, the first time since the game began. "You're right, ma'am. I learned it from Garry Kasparov." "Kasparov taught you?" Langston asked, stunned. "Not personally," Matteo replied, making the final move. "But I studied all 183 of his documented games. He used this sequence against Karpov in 1984, game 23 of the World Championship." Eleanor scanned the guests for support, but found something new. Silent disapproval. For the first time, her peers weren't impressed by her. Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady. "My son woke up at 5 a.m. daily to study before school. He biked 6 miles to the library because we couldn't afford internet. When I worked double shifts, he solved chess problems by candlelight when our power was cut." The room fell silent. Matteo looked at his mother with love and resolve, making some guests look away, ashamed. "Checkmate," he said softly, placing his queen in the final position. Eleanor stared at the board, as if willing the pieces to shift. When she looked up, Matteo met her gaze with the same calm he'd started with. The room's dynamics had shifted. Guests no longer saw Matteo as a sideshow, but as someone who'd rewritten their notions of talent and merit. They looked at Eleanor with embarrassment and disappointment she'd never faced. What Eleanor Prescott didn't yet know was that this board defeat was just the opening move in a larger game, one where the social rules she took for granted would be challenged, and the boy she'd underestimated would prove true. Nobility isn't about wealth or lineage. Eleanor stared at the board for 15 seconds that felt eternal. Her trembling fingers touched the fallen king, as if it could undo the checkmate. The silence was thick, broken only by the ticking of a $15,000 Swiss clock. That was luck, she stammered, her confidence gone. He must have memorized that sequence somewhere. Langston stood and approached the board. Eleanor, that kid just played a Sicilian variation I didn't even know, and I've played for 40 years. Senator Collins discreetly started recording. As a seasoned politician, she saw the viral potential, a prejudiced billionaire humbled by an underestimated prodigy. I don't accept this, Eleanor snapped, standing and knocking over pieces. Something's off. No one learns like that alone. Someone coached him to embarrass me. Matteo stayed seated, calm. Want a rematch? I'll play anyone here. Or all of you, if you'd like. The offer sparked nervous murmurs. It sounded impossible, but after what they'd seen, no one doubted him. You're getting cocky, Eleanor shot back, her face flushed with humiliation. A kid from the barrio doesn't speak to his betters like that. Sophia stepped forward, meeting Eleanor's gaze without flinching for the first time in 20 years. Mrs. Prescott, she said firmly, my son isn't from the barrio. We're from a working-class community, and he's not cocky. He's honest about his skills, something you clearly can't be. The room's tension spiked. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, sensing something bigger than a chess match unfolding. Eleanor turned to Sophia, furious. How dare you speak to me like that? Have you forgotten your place? No, Sophia replied calmly. I've remembered my worth. Langston stepped in, uneasy. Eleanor, maybe we should acknowledge the young man's talent. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Don't you see? This was a setup. Someone trained him to make me look foolish in my own home. Matteo stood, his voice carrying a maturity that silenced the room. Mrs. Prescott, want the truth? I wasn't trained to humiliate you. I studied chess for 8 years because I dreamed of facing players who respect the game, who know talent doesn't care about race, class, or name. He paused, meeting each guest's eyes. When you asked me to show you how we play in the barrio, I thought I'd get a chance to earn respect. But you didn't want a fair game. You wanted to humiliate me. Senator Collins stopped recording, enthralled. How old are you, kid? 17, Matteo replied. How long have you played seriously? 8 years. Collins looked at Eleanor with disbelief and disapproval. Eleanor, you've been outplayed by a self-taught teen, a teen whose family you employ, a teen you invited to mock. Eleanor felt the weight of every stare. For the first time, they weren't looks of admiration but judgment. I didn't know he was serious, she stammered, her voice weak. It's not about his seriousness, Langston said, irritated. You assumed he'd lose because he's your housekeeper's son, because he's Latino, because he's not rich. The silence was crushing. Matteo calmly reset the pieces with precision. Thanks for the game, Mrs. Prescott. It was educational. He turned to his mother. Mama, can we go? I have school tomorrow. Sophia nodded, removing her apron. Before leaving, she faced Eleanor one last time. Mrs. Prescott, thank you for showing me my son belongs in far better places than this. As they headed for the door, Senator Collins called out, Matteo, interested in scholarships? I know universities that'd love your talent." Matteo stopped, offering his first genuine smile of the night. "Very interested, ma'am." Collins handed him her card. "Call me Monday." Eleanor stood frozen, grappling with how she'd lost control. In under an hour, she'd gone from revered hostess to the woman who'd misjudged a prodigy out of prejudice before prominent witnesses. As the door closed behind Matteo and Sophia, the remaining guests exchanged awkward glances. Langston stood first. "I should go." One by one, they left, offering cold goodbyes and disapproving looks. Eleanor stood alone, staring at the board, where her arrogance had been dismantled by a teen she deemed inferior. But she didn't yet grasp that this night was just the opening move in a larger game, one where Matteo Alvarez would rewrite his story and challenge the privilege Eleanor took for granted. As Matteo walked home with his mother under the Hamptons' starry sky, he held the card that would change his life. In his mind, he was calculating not just chess moves, but steps in a bigger game, proving true nobility isn't bought, but earned through character. 6 months later, Matteo Alvarez strode through Harvard's halls with a full scholarship to study computer science. Senator Collins kept her word, connecting him with opportunities and a network that valued talent over background. The video of that Hamptons night went viral, 3 million views in 2 weeks, not from the game itself, but because Senator Collins shared the story online, making Matteo a symbol of triumph and Eleanor a cautionary tale of privilege misused. "Teen genius crushes biased billionaire in chess" topped headlines. Comments flooded in, "Shame on that woman," and "This kid deserves the world." Eleanor Prescott became a social pariah. Her country club revoked her membership after member outcry. 3 charities dropped her name from events. Even Langston, her friend of decades, avoided her. "Eleanor's always been haughty, but I never thought she'd be so cruel," Langston's wife said at a Nantucket dinner. Humiliating a kid like that publicly. Eleanor's worst realization was that Matteo never sought revenge. He just played chess, his natural mastery honed through years of quiet dedication. Her humiliation was self-inflicted, born of her own biases. Sophia was promoted to head of housekeeping at a luxury Manhattan hotel, a role paying triple with full benefits. Not charity, but recognition of her professionalism, finally seen beyond prejudice. Matteo launched a free online chess platform, linking underserved youth with college mentors. In 6 months, 1,200 kids learned not just chess, but life strategies no classroom could teach. "Chess showed me everyone has unique strategic value," Matteo told CNN. "Eleanor Prescott taught me some need to lose everything to learn what matters." Asked if he resented the woman who tried to shame him, Matteo smiled with the same calm from that night. "Grudges are pieces that block the game. I focus on building." Eleanor watched that interview alone in her estate, now empty of friends who'd abandoned her. For the first time, she understood what she'd lost. Not just a game, but a chance to be better. Langston called once post-incident saying, "Eleanor, you set this up." Matteo just responded with the class you should have shown. The lesson spread beyond the Hamptons. Matteo proved nobility comes from character forged in hardship, not wealth or names. He turned prejudice into purpose, others' scorn into his growth. Today, Matteo sees no limit set by others, only possibilities he creates. Eleanor tried to diminish him to feel bigger, but revealed that true greatness lies in lifting others up, not tearing them down. Sophia proudly framed a photo of Matteo earning his first academic honor at Harvard. Beside it hung a certificate from the chess program impacting thousands, achievements no money could buy, no bias could erase. The best revenge, Matteo found, isn't destroying those who belittle you. It's building something so extraordinary, their pettiness fades. Eleanor Prescott tried to make him a spectacle, but Mateo Alvarez became an inspiration. That difference defines not just chess winners, but life's victors. If this story of triumph and justice moved you, subscribe for more tales proving true power lies not in privilege, but in turning obstacles into extraordinary growth. Join us to share meaningful stories. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.